In 1980, a small comedy film about golf changed Hollywood forever. But here's what nobody talks about: the movie almost never got made. The studio rejected it twice. The star nearly quit acting. And the most memorable character in the entire film was improvised so heavily that the script supervisor didn't know what was happening from one take to the next. Caddyshack wasn't supposed to become a classic. It was supposed to disappear. Yet today, over 40 years later, people still quote it every single day. The shocking part? Most fans have no idea why this movie matters at all. In 1979, nobody wanted to make Caddyshack. Not really. The script sat on desks at major studios for months. Producers got rejection letter after rejection letter. Warner Brothers said no. Universal said no. Even smaller studios passed. The reason was simple: it didn't fit into any category that made sense to Hollywood executives at the time. It wasn't a big action movie. It wasn't a romance. It wasn't based on a famous book or a true story. It was just a comedy about a country club. A golf comedy. Studios didn't believe golf comedies could work. They thought the subject matter was too niche, too boring for general audiences. One executive literally wrote on the script, "Who cares about golf?" But Douglas Kenney and Harold Ramis believed in it anyway. Kenney had co-founded National Lampoon magazine. Ramis was a comedy writer who understood absurdist humor in ways most people didn't. They saw something in this story that others couldn't see. They saw heart underneath the jokes. They saw class conflict. They saw the American dream twisted into something both funny and sad. The turning point came when Orion Pictures took a chance. Orion was newer, hungrier, willing to bet on unconventional projects. They gave the filmmakers a relatively small budget of around $4 million. By 1980 standards, that was modest. They didn't have money for big stars or elaborate sets. What they had was creative freedom. And that freedom changed everything. But here's what almost nobody knows: even after Orion said yes, the studio executives were nervous. They didn't understand the script's humor. They worried constantly that the finished film would be unwatchable. The director, Harold Ramis, was making his directorial debut. He had never directed a feature film before in his entire life. On paper, this looked like a recipe for complete failure. Yet something remarkable was about to happen on that golf course. Chevy Chase was already famous in 1980. Saturday Night Live had made him a star. He was recognizable. He was bankable. And he was hired to play Ty Webb, the wealthy, eccentric golfer who drifts through life without caring about consequences. On paper, this casting made sense. Chase was known for physical comedy and absurdist humor. He seemed perfect for the role. What nobody expected was what would happen on set. Chevy Chase didn't just follow the script. He barely looked at it. He would show up to scenes and improvise wildly. He'd change dialogue. He'd add bits that weren't written. He'd talk to the other actors in ways that seemed completely unscripted. The script supervisor would frantically try to write down what he was actually saying, knowing that editors would need to know the exact words later. Most of the time, she couldn't keep up. Chase was moving too fast, thinking too quick, spinning comedy out of thin air. Director Harold Ramis could have shut it down. He could have demanded that Chase stick to the script. Instead, Ramis did something brilliant: he let him loose. He gave Chase more freedom with each scene. He encouraged the improvisation. He understood that Chase was tapping into something genuine and funny that the written word couldn't capture. Some of Chevy Chase's most iconic moments in cinema came from these improvised scenes. His monologues about the meaning of life. His bizarre observations. His complete detachment from normal social rules. All of it was largely unscripted. The other cast members had to adapt in real time. Rodney Dangerfield, playing the crude real estate developer Al Chervik, was a comedy veteran who could keep up with Chase's energy. Ted Knight, playing the uptight Judge Smales, had to react to things he didn't expect. Dangerfield actually thrived in this chaos. He was a stand-up comedian who understood how to work without a net. He fed off the unpredictability. The studio executives watching dailies were confused. They couldn't tell if this was genius or disaster. The film felt loose, messy, uncontrolled. It didn't look like a traditional comedy. It looked like organized chaos. But slowly, something became clear: audiences would love this. The rawness felt real. The humor felt dangerous because it wasn't safe or predictable. This was the moment the movie found its soul. There's a gopher in Caddyshack. You know the one. It pops up throughout the movie causing chaos at the golf course. It's adorable. It's funny. It's memorable. Most people assume it was planned from the beginning, that the filmmakers wrote the gopher into the script as a central comedic device. They're wrong. The gopher wasn't supposed to be that important. In the original script, it was a minor plot element. A background nuisance. Something that existed but didn't drive the story. Then something unexpected happened during production. The gopher became so charming, so funny in the dailies, that the filmmakers realized they had something special. Here's the truth that shocked everyone: the gopher was controlled by puppeteers. It wasn't a real gopher running around the golf course. It was a sophisticated puppet operated by skilled technicians. But the puppet was so well designed, so expressive, that it felt alive. It had personality. It had attitude. When it appeared on screen, it stole scenes from the actors. The filmmakers started writing more gopher scenes. They increased the creature's screen time. They gave it more prominence in the story. By the time filming wrapped, the gopher had become one of the most important characters in the entire movie. It represented chaos. It represented nature invading human order. It represented the absurdity underneath the whole story. A $4 million comedy was being partially carried by a puppet that almost got cut from the film entirely. The gopher became iconic in ways nobody predicted. It spawned merchandise. It got quoted in conversations. People remembered Caddyshack partly because of a small furry creature that was never supposed to matter. This is a perfect example of how the best moments in cinema often come from accidents. From improvisation. From letting go of the plan and following instinct instead. Even the actors didn't know exactly when the gopher would appear. Sometimes it would pop up unexpectedly during a scene. Their genuine surprise became part of the comedy. The line between performance and reality blurred. Everything felt fresh because nothing was completely controlled. Nothing was completely predictable. But the gopher was just one part of a much larger problem the filmmakers were facing. By mid-1980, as Caddyshack neared completion, Orion Pictures was panicking. The studio had invested millions of dollars in a film that looked nothing like what they expected. The tone was all over the place. One moment it was crude and raunchy. The next moment it was almost sweet and philosophical. There were scenes about class warfare and social climbing that felt almost serious. Then suddenly there was a scene about a dancing gopher. Test screenings made executives nervous. The film was too weird. It was too uneven. It didn't have the structure that successful comedies were supposed to have. It didn't have a clear three-act structure with a traditional climax. It didn't build toward an obvious resolution. Instead, it meandered. It wandered. It did whatever it felt like doing. By every traditional measure of filmmaking success, Caddyshack looked like it was going to fail spectacularly. One studio executive reportedly said the movie was unreleasable. Those were the actual words used in internal memos. The consensus among the business people was that they had wasted $4 million on a bizarre, tonally confused mess that nobody would want to watch. They considered shelving it entirely, taking the financial loss and moving on to projects that made more sense. The marketing department didn't know how to sell it. How do you market a movie that you can't even describe easily? Is it a sports comedy? Is it a satire? Is it about golf or about something deeper? The advertising campaigns felt confused because the studio itself was confused about what they had made. But then something miraculous happened. The studio decided to release it anyway. Not because they believed in it, but because they had already spent the money. They might as well try to recoup some losses. They set a modest release schedule. They didn't expect it to be a huge box office success. They expected it to disappear quickly, play in a few theaters, and vanish from memory within weeks. Nobody at Orion Pictures could have predicted what actually happened when Caddyshack hit theaters on July 25, 1980. Audiences didn't hate it. They didn't think it was too weird or uneven. They absolutely loved it. The film that executives thought was a disaster became something unexpected, a genuine phenomenon. The real shock was just beginning to unfold. What the studio executives didn't understand was that Caddyshack worked precisely because it broke the rules. The tonal shifts weren't mistakes. They were intentional. The chaos wasn't a flaw. It was the entire point. Harold Ramis had created something revolutionary without the studio realizing it. The film operated on a principle that most comedies avoided: it trusted the audience to be intelligent. It didn't spell everything out. It didn't pause to explain jokes. It moved fast, assuming viewers would keep up. It mixed lowbrow humor with surprisingly sophisticated social commentary. Working-class characters interacted with wealthy elites. The film poked fun at both groups without being mean-spirited. It found humor in the collision between different worlds colliding at one golf course. Rodney Dangerfield's character, Al Chervik, represented something America was obsessed with in 1980, self-made wealth. He was crude, he was loud, he didn't care what people thought. He represented a kind of freedom that the old money characters like Judge Smales desperately tried to contain. Ted Knight's performance as the uptight judge was brilliant precisely because he played it completely straight. He was funny not because he was trying to be funny, but because he was trying so hard not to be. Chevy Chase's philosophical monologues about life and meaning, delivered while high on cocaine in one interpretation, hit differently than traditional comedy. They were funny and weirdly genuine at the same time. The character wasn't just a punchline. He was exploring real ideas about existence, even if he was doing it while being completely ridiculous. That combination created something deeper than audiences expected from a golf comedy. The film also captured a specific moment in American history. 1980 was a year of economic anxiety. Class tensions were rising. Traditional institutions were being questioned. Caddyshack captured all of this through the lens of a country club. It was a time capsule without being preachy about it. The humor came from real social conflict, which made it resonate more powerfully than comedies based on pure absurdism. The genius was in the restraint too. The filmmakers could have explained everything. They could have made the social commentary obvious and heavy-handed. Instead, they let it breathe. They let viewers discover the deeper layers themselves. This approach meant the film would have staying power. It would reveal new things on repeat viewings. Years later, film critics would realize what had happened. Caddyshack was a masterclass in comedic filmmaking. It just took time for people to recognize it. Caddyshack opened on July 25, 1980, and immediately surprised everyone. It made money. Real money. It stayed in theaters longer than expected. Word of mouth was strong. People went back to see it again. They quoted it to their friends. They wanted to own it when it came to home video. Within weeks, it became clear that Orion Pictures hadn't made a disaster. They'd made a hit. Chevy Chase's career accelerated dramatically. He was already famous, but Caddyshack made him a genuine movie star. Studios wanted him in everything. He could command higher salaries. He could pick better roles. For a moment, it seemed like Chase had unlimited potential. He had timing. He had charm. He could do physical comedy and absurdist humor better than almost anyone in Hollywood. But success came with complications. Chase became known for being difficult on sets. He clashed with directors. He had conflicts with co-stars. The same improvisational instinct that made Caddyshack magical became problematic when directors wanted more control. His career would have many peaks and valleys after this moment. Rodney Dangerfield's story was different. He was already in his late 50s when Caddyshack came out. He'd been a stand-up comedian for decades, struggling for recognition. This film changed his life in ways that felt like a second act. Suddenly, he was getting movie roles. He was in demand. Caddyshack proved that he could translate his comedy style to film. His career had a genuine renaissance. He would appear in more movies throughout the 1980s. He became a recognizable face to younger audiences who might never have seen his stand-up work. Ted Knight had already found success on the television show, The Mary Tyler Moore Show, but Caddyshack gave him a different kind of role. He proved he could carry a film. He could be the center of comedy. His deadpan delivery as Judge Smails became his signature. He would continue acting for decades, but Caddyshack remained one of his most celebrated performances. People remembered him for this role more than almost anything else he did. Bill Murray had a smaller role in the film, but it was significant. He played Carl Spackler, the groundskeeper obsessed with killing the gopher. Murray's performance was understated and weird. He brought a melancholy to a supporting character that could have been just a joke. His work in Caddyshack helped establish him as a serious comedic actor. It showed that he could do more than just be silly. He could be genuinely touching while being funny. The success of Caddyshack also changed how Hollywood thought about comedies. Studios realized that movies didn't need to follow strict formulas to succeed. Audiences were hungry for something different. Something unpredictable. Something that trusted them to be smart. But the film's impact would only grow with time. Over 40 years later, Caddyshack remains one of the most quotable films in cinema history. Cinderella Story. You're away from home. Noonan. Oh, this your wife, huh? People who weren't even born when the film came out know these lines. They quote them without knowing where they come from. The film has penetrated American culture in ways that most movies never achieve. What makes this achievement remarkable is that Caddyshack shouldn't have had this impact. It was a small film made on a modest budget with a relatively unknown director. It had no franchise potential. There were no sequels planned. There was no merchandising strategy beyond the gopher puppet. Yet somehow, this accidental masterpiece became more memorable than blockbusters that cost 10 times more money. The film influenced comedy filmmaking for decades. Directors studied how Harold Ramis balanced chaos with structure. How he allowed improvisation without losing the narrative thread. How he mixed different comedic styles, lowbrow and highbrow, physical and verbal, absurdist and grounded. Young filmmakers watched Caddyshack and learned that rules could be broken. That comedy didn't require perfect execution. That authenticity mattered more than polish. Caddyshack also became a cultural touchstone for a specific generation. Baby boomers who were in their 20s and 30s when it came out adopted it as their film. They showed it to their children. They quoted it at parties. It became part of their identity. The film captured something about the American experience: class anxiety, ambition, the desire to break free from social restrictions, that resonated deeply. The movie's influence extended to television and other films. You can see echoes of Caddyshack's tonal style in countless comedies that followed. The willingness to mix genres. The trust in audience intelligence. The balance between humor and heart. These weren't revolutionary ideas before Caddyshack, but the film demonstrated how powerful they could be when executed with confidence. In 2017, the American Film Institute ranked Caddyshack as one of the greatest comedies ever made. Decades after its release, film scholars and critics recognized what audiences had known all along: this was a genuinely important film. It wasn't just funny. It was smart. It was culturally significant. It had staying power that most movies could never achieve. The hidden truth about Caddyshack is this: sometimes the best art comes from not trying too hard. From letting go of control. From trusting instinct over planning. From surrounding yourself with talented people and letting them do what they do best. This film was rejected by studios. It was nearly shelved as a disaster. It was made by a first-time director with a script that executives didn't understand. Yet it became immortal. It became part of how America sees itself. Many people watching this have watched Caddyshack multiple times without knowing these stories behind the scenes. If you've ever wondered why this movie feels different from other comedies, now you know. It's because it was made differently. It was made with freedom. And that freedom changed cinema forever. Here's what almost nobody realizes when they watch Caddyshack today: the film works as a perfect mirror of its own creation. The movie is about chaos and order colliding. About people breaking free from expectations. About the unpredictable winning against the rigid and controlled. That's exactly what happened when this film was made. The chaos of improvisation defeated the rigid expectations of studio executives. The unpredictable became legendary. Chevy Chase brought improvisation that wasn't supposed to work. Bill Murray brought melancholy to what should have been a simple role. Rodney Dangerfield brought authenticity that made a caricature feel real. The Gopher, a puppet that almost got cut, became unforgettable. Harold Ramis directed his first feature film like someone who understood that the best moments in life can't be scripted. They can only be captured. The studio thought they had a disaster on their hands. They were wrong. They thought the film was too weird, too uneven, too different. They were wrong about that too. What they didn't understand was that audiences were hungry for something genuine. Something that felt alive. Something that took risks. Caddyshack took every risk imaginable and somehow landed perfectly. This story teaches us something important about creativity and courage. The things that make art truly memorable often come from the moments when you stop trying to control everything. When you trust your instincts. When you let talented people do what they were born to do. When you're willing to fail spectacularly in pursuit of something real. Caddyshack could have been forgotten. It should have been forgotten according to every logical calculation. Instead, it became immortal. It became the kind of film that defines a generation and influences filmmakers for decades to come. If you've ever felt like your idea was too weird, too different, too risky, remember Caddyshack. Remember that executives thought it was unreleasable. Remember that a gopher puppet almost didn't make the final cut. Remember that a first-time director trusted his instincts. Remember that improvisation and chaos created something that planning and control never could have produced. The real shock isn't that Caddyshack became a classic. The real shock is that anyone ever doubted it would. Before we wrap up, do you have a favorite Caddyshack moment? One of those lines or scenes that made you laugh every single time? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to know which moment hits hardest for you, because this community understands the magic of great storytelling. If you're enjoying stories that reveal the hidden truths behind the films and moments that shaped our culture, make sure you subscribe. The next story we're covering reveals something equally surprising about another film that almost never made it to theaters. You won't believe what almost happened. Many of you watching have experienced moments where everyone doubted your vision. Where people said your idea wouldn't work. Where the odds seemed impossible. If you've ever pushed forward anyway and found success, you're part of the same spirit that made Caddyshack happen. You're not alone in that journey. Caddyshack reminds us that the best stories, both on screen and in our own lives, come from taking chances. From trusting people. From allowing imperfection. From embracing the beautiful chaos of creation. This film started as a rejected script that nobody wanted. It became one of the most beloved movies ever made. That's the real story. That's the legacy that matters. Thank you for spending this time exploring the hidden side of Caddyshack. This channel is dedicated to stories like this, the ones that reveal what really happened behind the scenes, the decisions that shaped culture, the accidents that became masterpieces. If this story resonated with you, you know where to find more. But for now, keep watching, keep wondering, and keep asking the questions that matter. Because the best stories are always hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to find them.